welcome to another episode of Derech Erezt. Judaism views the fight for justice as being of primary importance. In South Africa, a number of Jews have demonstrated great self-sacrifice in fighting for the rights of others. Rabbi Liebenberg explores what it takes to go against the grain.
When the first temple of Solomon was destroyed in Jerusalem, and the people of Judah went out to exile, the prophet Jeremiah said to them, "You're going to go out into exile. You're going to go to a foreign country and a foreign town. When you go to that town, make sure to seek out the peace of that town and to pray for its leaders. Because when that town is in peace, you too will be in peace. When that town prospers, you too will prosper." And therefore Jeremiah was saying to the Jewish people, when you live in the diaspora, don't just be concerned about yourself, your particular little tribe, but care also about those who are beyond you, those who are not the same as you. Yes, this was a small nation and very often a persecuted nation, and they were living outside of their country, outside of their land, but nevertheless they had to care about those who were not the same as themselves. And the Talmud gives the reason for this, mipnei darkei shalom, because of the ways of peace. This is the way in which we can create relationships between our community and the general community, peaceful relationships. And very often a person has to go beyond themselves. They have to go against the grain. It's very fascinating that in the Bible, Abraham is referred to as Avram HaEvri, Abraham who was the Hebrew. What does that term mean, HaEvri, the Hebrew? And the sages explain that he's called Evri because Evri means he came from the other side of the river. The whole world was standing on one side and he was standing on the other side. He went against the grain. He didn't just do what was expected of a person like him, but he did something completely different. And this is something that he taught his son Isaac and his grandson Jacob, that one should be concerned not just for oneself and one's family, one's spouse, one's community, but even the general people that are out there. And this we see mostly in the patriarch Jacob. Jacob traveled all around. He was in the diaspora for a long time. And when eventually he came back to the land of Canaan, he bought a piece of land in Shechem, what is today modern-day Nablus. And the Bible tells us in Hebrew, Vayichan et penei ha'ir, that he did something for the residents of the city. What did Jacob do? He didn't care just about his own family, but he also wanted to do something for the people of Shechem, for the town that had taken in him. And our sages tell us that he did three things. First of all, he minted a coin. Up till then, everyone was just involved in bartering. He created a financial system. Secondly, he built a merchat, a bathhouse, to make sure that people would take care of their own health and hygiene. And thirdly, he set up a system of shvakim, of marketplaces, so that people could come at a particular time during the week, perhaps it was a few times during the week, and they could buy things with one another. He wasn't just concerned about his own family, his particular tribe, but about the universal. And so all of us, especially at this time that the world is going through so many difficulties, should not just be concerned about ourselves and our family, but about those who live beyond us.
In April of 2020, one of the Jewish Ravonia trialists, Dennis Goldberg, passed away. We pay tribute to him here today at Lily's Leaf Farm with Nick Wolpe. Behind me is the house where Dennis was arrested, so make sure that you stay tuned to learn more.
I think Dennis was a very complex individual. He was from that group or ilk who were disciplined, even to some degree within the social setting. Sounds strange, but there was also an element of cautiousness because you were taught not to trust. And of course, once you were taught not to trust, it became increasingly difficult to unlearn it. You know, because once you spent many, many years being taught that you must be very cautious about who you interact with, because you don't know who they may be or whether they were part of the security services, a spy. So that was on the one hand. I really got to know Dennis when I put on the Rivonia Trial Reunion. And it was from 2002 that I really got to know him, particularly when he returned to South Africa. So Dennis was a man of immense integrity, a man of conviction, a man who really believed in the ideals of what the struggle was about. But he also had a great sense of humor. Like a lot of the Jews, there was that sort of Lithuanian activism that spread. And Dennis's parents were of Lithuanian descent. His mother and father were members of the Communist Party. You know, they were very accepting of different ethnic groups coming to the house. And I remember Dennis actually saying that he remembered sitting on his father's lap when his father was reading the newspaper, and they were discussing politics. So his political consciousness was triggered by his parents and their political activism. Lily's Leaf wasn't just a place that kind of fell from the sky. It had its roots in Sharpeville. Like so many events in this country had their roots in Sharpeville. If you were to talk about a pivotal moment in our liberation struggle, I would say Sharpeville is that pivotal moment, because Sharpeville redefined the struggle, pushed it down a new path, pushed it onto a trajectory that led to 1990 and 1994. And the banning of the ANC forced the Communist Party to find alternative meeting places, because the Communist Party had been banned in 1950, and they were meeting in safe houses, but those safe houses now were starting to be used by ANC leaders who'd gone underground. So Bram Fischer, who was the chairman of the Communist Party, instructed Michael Harmel and Ahmed Kathadra. And Michael Harmel found Lily's Leaf, and they purchased it in August of 1961 through a front company called Navian Pty Limited. So the funds came from Moscow through Zurich into my uncle's trust account, because my father was the lawyer to start with that did the legal work around the purchasing. And a lot of the evidence that was presented at the Rivonia trial was taken from my uncle's law firm. So interesting, you can see how a number of Jews were very much involved in the purchase of Lily's Leaf for the Communist Party. So Lily's Leaf was purchased primarily at the outset as the meeting place for the leadership of the Communist Party, for the Secretariat, the Politburo, and other leadership structures. And its first occupant was Nelson Mandela, who moved here in October of 1961. The moment that was the most significant and key moment for Dennis was the arrest, was the raid on Lily's Leaf and his arrest. That was, because in fact, he had been told to leave the country, and he'd actually come to ask for permission to go. But he landed up being here on the day of the raid.
I was sitting in this chair, a chair like this. I was reading a book that I'd taken from the bookshelf. It was Robert Junk's Brighter Than 1,000 Suns, the story of the first atom bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And Derech came through here. There he is in his raincoat, dancing like a cop with a revolver in his pocket. And I rushed for that door to go to the toilet to get rid of my notes about the explosives. And I got to the toilet and there were cops there, and I couldn't get rid of them. So we were caught.
And this is a crime scene photo of the police. This is Derech. And why Derech was significant, they brought two people, Derech and Kennedy. The two of them were experts in collecting evidence. His legacy in later years, up until his death, was a person who was not prepared to remain silent against the very organization that he had dedicated and sacrificed his life for the justice, freedom of the people, and being a part of the liberation movement. He was very vocal in where the ANC was going. He was very vocal regarding the failures of the ANC, and he spoke truth to power. And in today's age of politics, people do not speak truth to power. They're very afraid to speak truth to power. And I think that forms part of his legacy, which underpins the commitment and determination that he had to ensure that we achieved the principles and objectives of what our liberation struggle was about. And not only the principles and objectives, but to achieve social justice in a global context. The fact that he sacrificed his life, the fact, like so many others, he gave of himself, and he was willing to give the ultimate sacrifice, I think is significant. And I think this point highlights it. And I always remember it. And again, he said it with immense humor. So he recalls, he says, there we were sitting in the dock, listening to Nelson's "I'm prepared to die for" speech. And he says, and of course Nelson gets to the point where he says, if need be, Your Honor, it's an ideal for which I'm prepared to die. So Dennis is recalling that and says, typical of Nelson, typical, no consultation. He offers us up for death. But then he became serious, and then he said, you know what? A sense of pride filled up within me, a sense of doing something meaningful. I was prepared to die, he said. I was filled with that pride. And that sums up him and a lot of others. The legacy is they were willing to give the most ultimate sacrifice for the beliefs in which they believed in, their lives. And I think it goes to the heart of Derech Erezt. I think it goes beyond it, because it's saying, in fact, I'm willing to die for these ideals. If you truly believe in the ideals, you are willing to give of your life. So in my opinion, Dennis's Derech Erezt is very clearly and very succinctly social justice, political justice, equality, gender equality, and giving a voice to the marginalized and poor, which has become very pronounced today again, given what Covert has done. But he was a social activist who strongly believed in social equality, which was something that was lacking then and is lacking today.
Politics isn't something that everybody naturally gets involved with, but Gabby Faber tells us about her journey from a sheltered background to fighting for social justice from within the ANC.
From the beginning, must understand that I was the most apolitical person. So it's my first day at university. I'm like, this little seminary girl coming back from Israel, got a little handbag. We're sitting in our first lecture, and then there's this protest. And I'm like, what is going on? And I was literally got the biggest culture shock in my life. And eventually I went to one Jew and I was like, what's going on? Like, I really feel uncomfortable here. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, just be a bystander. They get involved in soldiers, which is the South African Union of Jewish Students. And I went into the interview and I said, I'm not political. I don't do anything political. Just don't do that. Next thing they phone me and they say, Gabby, I want to congratulate you. You're chairperson of Soldiers Wits. Land up doing it, actually land up absolutely loving it. And from that, I was exposed to more like the political side of it. And I remember I went eventually into one of the protests and I was like, what are you protesting about? And I said, free education, decolonized education. And I started just getting involved. And eventually you feel like you're part of something bigger. And for the first time in my life, I've never seen something like this where you do a political action or a statement or a protest and change happens immediately. And it was the most incredible experience because up until now I'd always been in the NGO sphere. And here it was like my whole life changed. And I started to realize that you can't bring change and transformation without politics. And at Wits specifically, that politics was ruled by the ANC and the PY, which is a coalition between the Young Communist Youth League, SASCO, which is the Student Trade Union, and the ANC. I think in the beginning, people thought I was absolutely crazy. And I think it's been amazing to see when you actually are confident in who you are. I was confident in that I'm an ANC comrade, but I was also confident in the fact that I'm a religious Jew. And I'm never going to, that those two identities have so previously contradicted themselves, but yeah, I'm able to bring them together. And I think, you know, with the Jewish community, when they saw that I was going and I was proud to be Jewish and I never forgot where I came from and where I exist in, people were able to support me. And I think when other people are proud of you, you're able to be proud of yourself.
The political space, particularly here within Wits, it's mostly dominated by black people. So and then when I met Gabby and then her having the interest and then bringing her into the organizations, obvious, a lot of people, even myself, I would have had reservations because you don't know what are the intentions of a person. But I think the most important thing is that our actions speak louder than the words or the things that we would say out there. So over time, I've seen her being able to transition to fulfill the same things she had stated when she came into the space, being able to participate, being able to be part of the broader community. Because the political space, particularly the student politics, with our organization, we represent everyone. So at that point, her being able to bring different churches, bringing different religious organizations and then uniting in one voice and still able to see a future for South Africa, even though at this current moment with everything that is happening, it's quite difficult to say we still have a bright future in South Africa. With what I have seen at Wits, I think South Africa has a better future, and I think that's how Gabby has portrayed herself, which is something that is amazing.
People always ask me, how have the comrades treated you? How do you feel marginalized or come with hostility? And yes, in the beginning there was. There's a fortune of hostility because I'm a Jew. And that's a very uncommon thing in the ANC. And I won't deny, the hostility broke me because I've never experienced anti-Semitism. I've never experienced being hostile because of my identity, and especially because I'm so a religious Jew where, you know, everything about me, even if I'm going out and protesting, I have to bring my little kosher food. You know, I have to leave early because I keep Shabbos. I have to come in my dress, you know, and get different kind of regalia to comrades. It's all of me, and it was so hard to feel that attack. As soon as we moved past that, I've just never felt such a welcoming.
But during the protest, there is some sort of a regalia that you wear. You have to wear all-stars, they allow you to run. Then Gabby will come wearing a dress and wearing flip-flops in a protest. And then we all laugh, like, you can't even go in front. There's no way, you won't be able to run. If you're running, it's easy for them to grab you. So I think for me that was sort of funny, but she has graduated to political activist.
One of the biggest points was where I saw like my Jewish values really stand out was my relationship to Israel. My Zionism always came from an extremely religious perspective, you know. And he explained, and they said, Gabi, you have to separate your religion from your politics. I was like, I can't, because I need you to understand that when I wake up every morning and I pray, I face towards Israel. All my religious experiences happened with Israel, in Israel. And I say grace after my meals. I pray for the peace of Israel. You know, these things are my religious identity. I can't turn my back on them, and I very much explained to comrades that why would you trust me if I'm willing to turn back on who I am and my people? Then how would I be loyal to a new people of the ANC? I really do feel that the Torah, the Bible, is something, you know, as a modern Orthodox Jew, it's something that constantly changes, and we have to keep up to date with the times. And I really do feel that this is a commandment of God. This is a commandment to Derech Erezt, Tikkun Olam, be a light unto the nations. And, you know, just like in the book of Esther, which we read on the Jewish festival of Purim, it says that he was just going into the King Ahasuerus's big banquet, and then Mordechai, her uncle, said, listen, either you can do it or someone else can do it. And I think that's always been a thing for me. You do it from everything I've been taught, from Yeshiva College, from my home, from my synagogue, from my Jewish youth movement, B'nai Akiva, from my gap year. I do it with those values from that standpoint. And there I can represent I can represent Avraham Avinu, the father of the Jewish people, thousands and thousands of years ago. I can represent Moses. I can represent me. I can represent my family. And I can represent the Jewish people, even in the ANC.
Well, we've come to the end of the show for this week's episode of Derech Eretz. We hope you learned more about the world of social justice. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a Facebook message at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Lauren Jaffe, and the Derech Eretz team, have a beautiful week.